Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. After touring for years around the world with Nahko and Medicine for the People, Hope Medford decided to have a baby. In this episode, Hope and I discuss her journey of becoming a doula and midwife, what it has been like to attend over 450 births, her experience of giving birth to her own daughter in water, and also performing in front of thousands of people as a drummer for Nahko and Medicine for the People. We also talk about the Big Island in this episode, and I just went to the Big Island for the first time in October, and it is just such a magical place. Hope hosts a festival each year in honor of the sacred feminine, and that's coming up this January. She shares more about it in the episode. You can get all the details in the show notes. And we have an exciting announcement coming up next week for Rising Woman Leaders. So definitely tune in to hear more about the Big Island and a women's retreat that my friend Kelly and I have been putting together behind the scenes coming up in April 2020. I can't wait to share that with you and more. Definitely stay tuned and enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Hope Medford, who has attended over 450 births in capacities of licensed midwife, doula, and apprentice. She's been highly trained in water birth and worked at the first water birth center in the United States. She's also had her own daughter at home in water. She's 4.5 years old now. She is a co-founder of the environmental education center Tryon Life Community Farm, focused on sustainability, permaculture, and social justice. She's played drums for 25 years, having studied in Africa, Brazil, and Peru. And she's taught over 2,500 students with the drum, has 3 solo albums of music, and was on the first 3 Nahko and Medicine for the People albums. She now co-produces Manifest Music Arts and Education Festival in Hawaii, a festival which features female performers, leaders, and educators. So thank you for being here, Hope.
You're welcome. My pleasure, Meredith.
I would love to perhaps just start with your interest in birth. And that's something that's always kind of been with me as well. I've picked up books and read about midwifery and childbirth, and it just has always been, it seemed like such a spiritual initiation. And I'm curious your interest in birth and how that came to be. Love to start there.
Well, I grew up in Kentucky, and I wasn't exposed to a lot of things culturally. And when I was in high school, I was invited to my first sister circle under the full moon, and I sat with this very small group of women. And one of the women mentioned that she'd had her child with a midwife. And I was curious right away. And she just said some other things about her midwife that kind of insinuated, power and grace and a spiritual presence that just kind of stuck with me. It wasn't necessarily a foreground thought, but it was something that I think just dropped into my subconscious. And a couple years later, one of my good friends from that time got pregnant unintentionally, and she asked me to be with her throughout the whole pregnancy and for the birth because the father was not in the picture. And so I said yes, of course. And she wanted to travel across the country in a Westphalia bus and live in the national parks and forests across the country to have the whole pregnancy be in nature. And so I took that journey with her, and I was just 19. And by the time she gave birth, I was 20. And I caught the baby. It was a very interesting experience. But basically, by the time she was giving birth, we were in California, and it's a state that has mixed kind of laws that support midwifery in and out of the hospital. And so as she was in labor, a licensed midwife happened to show up. We were in a natural setting on the beach by the ocean. She'd been laboring in the ocean. And this midwife, recommended that we go to the hospital. And it was interesting because it certainly jarred the natural labor process. And in retrospect, you certainly can't say what would have been different, but she ended up birthing in the Westphalia in the parking lot of the hospital. And I caught the baby, and the beauty and the power and the presence of that natural birth is stuck with me to this day. It was so palpable and potent and beyond anything I'd ever experienced. And then, having said that, the hospital staff came out and took the baby and cut the cord and separated the mom and the child. And it actually interfered with the bonding process between my friend and her son. And that also stuck with me and went very deep of how fragile that experience and that time, those precious moments are surrounding a birth, the labor, and how much they affect a woman's psyche. And as we know now, and as I know now, both the woman and the child, they are in this rite of passage. And the hormones and the chemistry that's happening within them is doing this deep limbic imprinting that will affect, their entire lives. And so keeping that experience intact and protecting it and keeping it sacred became a passion of mine as a byproduct of what I witnessed and was supporting for my dear friend. And I think that's how many of us in modern America are experiencing birth at this point, because we often are not educated about it in school or through stories until someone we know directly is having a child. And it's actually a piece that I feel passionate about, is spreading the word and raising awareness and education about pregnancy and birth and postpartum. They are definitely all pieces that are mystical and magical, and also need to be protected fiercely at times for a woman to have the most empowering experience that she can to become a mother, and that affects her relationship with her child.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does break my heart to know how much of that separation and the lack of sensitivity that there sometimes, or it seems to be often, there is in the hospital, just from stories I've heard. And yeah, I'm curious, as you continued on your journey as a doula and a midwife, did you find that I imagine you've been at all types of births. I wonder if you could share a little more about that, and just what you would say is like the most important piece around, like maybe even it's just educating the women beforehand. I know I've read a lot too around just like fear being something that like to really help women with before to really know how to go into those situations, or yeah, just anything more you want to share about this journey as you started to become a more like a doula and a midwife and support women on that journey.
Sure. So just to back up even from there, I would say like after my friend's birth experience, what actually happened next for me in my life was I went to India for a year, and I studied a lot of yoga and meditation, and took teachings from the Dalai Lama, and went much deeper on my spiritual path. And then when I returned, I decided that I really only wanted to work dedicating myself to serving humanity. And the next job that I did along those lines, I started doing hospice work. I worked with hospice for a year, taking care of elderly and dying people. And then I worked, sorry. And then I worked for a domestic violence shelter for women and children for a year, with women in crisis. It was after that the last woman that I had taken care of in my hospice practice was the mother-in-law to Elizabeth Gilmore, and she was the founder of the National College of Midwifery, and she was a practicing midwife who had started an amazing birth center in northern New Mexico that had become known for its incredible statistics. And we were serving over a third of Taos County. And so we had a high volume, and we're having great success rates and really good outcomes. So Elizabeth Gilmore invited me to be her next apprentice. And it was at that point I had actually bought a ticket to go back to India because I wanted to attend the Kumbh Mela, and I had to make this choice of, do I cash in my ticket and use that money to begin my process as an apprentice? And that is what I decided to do, my belief being that when I would return to India, it would be with this extra tool to bring with me, to have something else to offer. So it was a grounding choice for sure, but it began that path for me. And also, just to say that in my spirit, I've always been an artist and had a creative approach to things that I do. So I also had this passion of painting pregnant women and women in birth. And so it was another drive of even taking this apprenticeship opportunity, was to witness the beauty firsthand, to have an opportunity to create images of women empowered in their process. So Elizabeth is who led me into midwifery at a moment that I didn't expect it. And her education process was extremely hands-on. In the very first week, I cut a umbilical cord and, was helping directly at births. And under her, I experienced 2 to 3 births per week. And so it was a amazing, transformative experience to go through. Elizabeth is incredibly educated, but she's self-educated. And I think the way that someone is educated as a birth healthcare professional hugely affects how they practice. And in New Mexico at the time, there had not been laws around midwifery, and she had helped write them. And so she was very proactive, a strong activist. And again, she had educated herself quite a bit in the medical realms, that a lot of lay midwives did not have that same level of medical training. And so she was a pioneer a bit in that way, that she was very much integrating the holistic, hands-on approach that we think of with traditional midwives, with a very scientific, well-researched approach, including a lot of medical interventions that we were legally allowed to use in that state due to the laws that she had helped write. And so for us students of hers, we had an experience of this integration that I feel like is rare and hard to find, which is, again, learning in a safe, trusting environment that's loving and supportive and listening to mothers, while also having things at your fingertips if needed that can help prevent medical emergencies. And so she was very practical and pragmatic, even though she was very full of heart. And certainly was the greatest influence on my midwifery practice. But I did go on to apprentice with about 8 other midwives as well. I found it very helpful and effective to get a wide range of perspectives, because every midwife has her strengths, and every woman who chooses to develop themselves along this path will also find their own strengths. And so to collaborate and commune with a network of other birth care practitioners is always helpful, and I just deeply encourage that as a way to keep growing and going deeper. So when I started in New Mexico, we had a small community of midwives, and then I next moved to Oregon, where I practiced at the first water birth center in the United States, which had been inspired by Alina Tonetti Vladimirova of Russia, who was part of the Russian Black Sea birth movement. She's well known. She's a lovely person. And she created the movie Birth into Being, which anyone who's interested in birth, I highly recommend that movie. It's one of my all-time favorites, Birth into Being. Mm. And so at that birth center, I particularly focused on water birth and had a lot of experience and gained a lot of trust in water birth. Is a very simple birth process, but a lot of people that are around it don't trust it because they don't have as much experience in it. So anyone who's really wanting a water birth, I encourage them to really explore with their healthcare provider how much experience they have and how often their mamas actually get to birth in the water, not just labor in the water, and finding the right fit for you so that you can have the experience you want.
Mm-hmm. What, for anyone out there listening that maybe doesn't know very much about the benefits of water birth, would you share a little bit more about it?
Yeah. Water birth certainly is only for those that feel called to it. It's certainly not something that needs to be for everyone. But the benefits of water, warm water, mildly warm, it's not hot, is a natural pain relief in labor for a mom. So it's primarily used with women that are going for a more natural birth experience. In the water, you can move freely, you can squat, you can push against the sides of the tub, you can float. You can put flowers in it. You could put, stones. I've seen people put rose quartz in it, bless the flowers and put them in the water. It can be a beautiful environment. But the other thing is your child that's been inside your womb has been in this same temperature, say 99-degree water inside your body for 9 months. And so when it's transitioning from the water sac that it's living in inside until birthing into this water, then it's a very smooth and gentle transition. Were there to be any meconium or any, stress that causes fluids on the baby's face out of water in a regular land birth, those things could be inhaled and actually get lodged in the lungs and cause infection. But in a water birth, they get immediately washed away, so that that concern is completely diminished in the water. It definitely creates this kind of a sanctuary space for a mother where she is less interfered with, which is kind of important in that time. Sometimes in the land birth, there's too many hands and people, looking at a woman. And in water, you can certainly see well as a midwife. We have little underwater flashlights and, we can reach, but it just creates a bit of a container for the mother where I feel like what I see over and over again is women feel empowered within their space. And they sometimes a father of the baby or mother of the baby, second mother, would sit behind the woman or be in the water with the woman if that's what the mom chooses. And there's room for that, which can be a beautiful thing as well. And they can help catch the baby as well. But it's just this place of a gentle transition where the baby can, in one birth, I literally saw a baby float out. Having said that, once the baby's out, I do encourage the baby and with my hands to bring the baby up out of the water, relatively quickly. I'm not attached to a baby staying underwater at all. There's different conversations about that, but I think for me, I feel like it's the place to birth into and then bring the baby directly out of. But the baby will not try to take a breath of air until it touches air. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's safe to be born in the water. So as long as no part of the baby's body is touching air, then it won't take its first breath.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. And I love that visual of just like the woman having a sense of containment in her space and that sense of safety.
Mm-hmm.
Would you tell us a little about your journey to becoming a mother?
Sure. I think that becoming a midwife was a potent part of me afterward becoming a mother. I think, like you mentioned fear earlier, and a lot of us do have fear that haven't been around birth or pregnancy enough and haven't heard enough stories. And so for me, it was, directly going to serve in a birth situation over and over again and supporting women in their most beautiful and most powerful and most fierce moments, birthing their children, that really earned my trust in the pregnancy and birth process for myself. It was important for me to see it, viscerally experience it, and be in that energy to trust that I was ready and that I could do it also. And, we always hear that in like tribal communities of the past, that women did attend each other's births in communities, sisters and aunties and grandmothers, and all these would come to each other's births. So most women would see many, many births before they birthed themselves. But in our society, that does not often happen. But I do encourage it if you have the opportunities and it feels right to experience birth as often as you can in a positive way before you're giving birth yourself. For me, it definitely, I was drawing on the different things that I had seen and learned from the many beautiful and powerful women I had served. And many of their stories would play out in my mind at different points throughout my pregnancy and during labor. And I was drawing wisdom from them, from the things that I'd seen that had worked, and learned from the things that I saw that had created challenges. And so all these women were my teachers, and really important part of that for me. When I decided to have a child, I was fully immersed touring with Nahko and Medicine for the People. And but I still felt like the timing was right, and my body was telling me that. And so I did continue to tour until I was 6.5 months pregnant, which is not necessarily something I would recommend, but for me, it was the journey. And it's funny because I feel like we can romanticize what we think our life will be like or what we expect or want it to be like, but then you wake up in the morning and then you look at your life and you work with what you have. And for me, during my pregnancy, I traveled back and forth across the country. I traveled to Australia, to New Zealand, to Haiti, Jamaica, on tour performing in front of thousands and thousands of people. And I just kept transmuting that energy and saying, I'm bringing this energy and this joy to my baby. And part of why I loved playing music with Nahko and Medicine for the People was because of that positive message that we were always trying to impart into our fans and community, and growing this energy of love. And so I felt like my child would know that, and that hopefully she'd have really good rhythm too. But yeah, when I was 6.5 months pregnant, my belly was finally big enough that I could not play, I felt like, much longer effectively bending over playing the cajon drum that I love to play. So it felt like the perfect time to step off of tour. And then I found myself in a new community. And I feel like it's important to have a midwife, as soon as you can, just to have that support and relationship and trust being built. the midwife that I found, it was a woman I had known previously. And then she partnered with a woman who was in her early 60s who had been to about 1,400 births. Because for me, I knew it was very important to work with somebody that had a lot more experience than I had, so I could really lean on them. And they were the perfect midwife team for me. The one woman was in her 30s, the other woman in her 60s. The younger woman was very researched and full of fresh knowledge, and the older woman had, many, many, many years of experience. So it was a great team. And I chose to birth in my home, and we had a water birth tub set up, and it was a beautiful and smooth labor. And but it's never easy, and there's a lot to say about that. But in the beginning of the labor, I ate really well, a lot of protein, which any midwife will tell you to do that. Eat well, so that you have the energy to make it through the journey of labor. And then I walked to the ocean and I prayed, and with my grandmothers, and I called them in through my song, and tears came, and I felt like I was crying for generations past of their birthing process. And a lot of energy and emotion came through me that I feel like helped clear the path. Because a lot of things that women face when they're entering labor are things that we're holding within us, things that maybe they're fears, maybe they're ancestral fears, maybe there's tension, maybe there's concerns about how something's going to go, how your child's going to be, how you'll be received. We could talk about that for a long time, but for me in my little process, it was just releasing those things, just happened naturally in the beginning with this intention of prayers at the ocean. And then I walked back. It's just about a half mile. And so that walking is the other piece. I walked during most of my labor. I had seen that be extremely effective in the fastest healthy labors that I'd been to, that women walked a lot of their labor. And that walking helps open your pelvis, and it helps as your legs move, your pelvis shifts back and forth, and it allows your baby to rock and rotate slowly down into your pelvis and for them to find their way gently. So by the time I called my midwife and she arrived, I was already 10 centimeters dilated. So that was great news. And then at that point we filled up the tub, and she was born less than 4 hours later after the midwife got there. So my labor in total was probably about 11 hours, but the harder part was about 6. The average length labor of a first-time mom is about 24 hours. So a lot of people think when you talk about 15 hours, 15 hours or 20 hours, they think, oh my gosh, that's so long. And it can be, it depends on the labor. But, there can be normal labors that I've attended that are 30 hours or 35 hours or 40 hours. And sometimes a mother has that second wind and that third wind, and they have plenty of strength to go that journey and still have a natural, healthy labor. It really just depends on the birth and on the woman and how the baby is moving down the pelvis. So it's hard to say from the outside. You can never say how a woman's experience of her labor was. Like, each woman knows for herself. And certainly at the time, it was hard for me. And in reflection, as soon as I could step back and look at it, I realized, oh, that was a very smooth labor. But it takes everything you have, to have a natural birth most of the time. So that's real. And that's what makes it the rite of passage that it is. And it's also part of the power that you bond with your baby immediately after. The hormones rush through your body and through your baby's body, and you bond immediately with that skin-to-skin contact. Looking into each other's eyes is very important right after birth, and that bonding is precious. And as soon as that energy comes in, then it overrides what you've gone through most of the time. And, again, there's so many variations on women's births, and I'm just speaking for my own. There can be, challenges, and I have a lot of empathy and compassion for a lot of women who've been through different types of experiences. And I've also been to a couple that were on that borderline, orgasmic type of experience, which we've all heard about now, but it's very rare. I mean, not to be expected. But, the more preparation you do, the more you educate yourself, the more you connect with your body and your spirit and your baby in the pregnancy, even preconception, the stronger that you're approaching the minute of going into labor, the stronger you are as you go into labor, in those moments. It's just the breath is your guide, and, trusting your own body over what other people say most of the time is the best guide. Certainly there can be people that give good advice, but usually if you need it. And if you do, then it's fantastic to have people to lean on to get support. And otherwise, it's, mothers can feel how the baby is descending in her body and often naturally chooses the positions and the movements that she needs to help guide the baby down. It's an amazing, beautiful dance and really inspiring. And I'm so grateful that I birthed my child the way I did. I'm so grateful that I have a daughter. And I know for a lot of modern women that put off having children until much older and much later in lives, that it can be built up and there can be fear around it. But I would certainly say there's nothing in my life that is compared to the love and the joy that I have from having birthed my daughter and having my daughter. And it's certainly, touring with Nahko Medicine for the People does not compare. And and it's also part of what gave me the strength, funny enough, when I was touring. Because, when we started with Medicine for the People in the beginning, we were just playing on the streets, in downtown and busking and that type of thing. And but we grew really quickly. Within 3-4 years, we were playing for thousands of people on big stages. And so it was a very fast transformation for us. And for me, I had never personally intended to be a professional musician. For me, the drum was always just a spiritual tool. I played drums for many, many years before I met Nahko. And it was very casual how we started. We met around a bonfire. And but as we did hit those much bigger stages, and there would be, the lights were out and the fans were yelling, and we would get on stage, I would think about these babies. There's one baby in particular that I often think about, this really tiny baby that was born prematurely. That one was born in the hospital, not at home intentionally. But that baby, it would often come to my mind, and I would always think, the strength of these babies, the beauty and the strength of them, and what I've seen and been through with holding, life and death and that fragility in my hands is so much more potent than, playing for 5,000 people, that it would just ground me instantly, and it would be very easeful. And I never felt nervous or afraid or scared. People would say, "Oh, are you nervous playing for all these people?" I'd say, "No, but going to a birth, that's this whole other depth of humanity and experience in life." And it gave me that frame of reference, and I think, deepened my character in that way. But yeah, anyway.
Just a funny story. There's so much mystery and unspoken sacredness, and I imagine can't even put words to it, just the mystery of life and death and birth and all of that. And I can really just, I feel what you're saying about, it's a big deal playing in front of so many people, and wow, to witness those really sacred rites of passage in life.
Yeah, to be with one woman in the dark in the middle of the night when her baby is, in her womb, and that power is really beyond any other, power. Birth and death, that gateway, that doorway, is the potency, of life. And there is so many amazing, holistic ways of, looking at that experience too. And, some midwives talk about the spirit of the baby being present in the room and communicating with the mother, with the midwife, or, these type of conscious conception, preconception communications with the spirit of your child, or speaking to you in dreams, and all these other beautiful layers that are surrounded in a woman's process as she's journeying through and just trusting that her, baby will be perfect on the other end, and that you'll make it through together. It's a real surrender, and to be able to be with women in that process as midwife or doula or friend, sister, in any way that you show up is so critical and so potent and so needed in our world right now. We need more midwives. We need more doulas. It's part of why every year I try to do trainings, because education is necessary, and we need more women that show up for each other and work in this field and support each other, and then create more joy around it so there's less fear around it. So if anyone listening is feeling that call, like, yes, I would love to experience that, then please do reach out and, find the nearest doula training or birth collective and get involved, and you'll find out there's a huge need, and it's easier than you think to show up for a woman that maybe you've never met before. You get to know her and you build that trust, and you can step in and be that sister that maybe she needs. Maybe she doesn't have family with her, and your support can make all the difference. There's this one great statistic that my doula trainer friend shared with me, which is they did research and showed that a woman birthing in a hospital room with the hospital staff versus a woman birthing in a hospital room with the hospital staff, with one woman sitting in the corner who is not staff, who never says anything or interacts with the woman. The woman who birthing who has that woman sitting in the corner always has better birth results.
Wow.
And it's interesting because, just being witnessed and just being felt by another female presence in that space, that's what we're talking about. And just showing, because I think sometimes there's that conversation, well, I don't have enough to give, or I haven't had a child yet, so how could I help? Or just doubting oneself. But then when it comes down to it, that statistic just shows like any other woman in the room. And then you add positive intentions and some tools to that, and then you've even more greatly increased her positive birth results. So that's my plug, to encourage women to get involved if you so feel inspired. And it's always something you can do for a short time or for a little while. But I encourage that education before giving birth yourself, because there is so much to learn. And I was teaching a doula training last year, and then one of the women that went through it with me, she had her baby this year, and it was so fun to hear from her and just say, I'm so grateful for what I learned, because I was able to bring it with me into my own pregnancy and birth. And then there was 2 women that gave birth from our doula training the year before, and it's just, it's a really beautiful way of gathering knowledge in a group of women, and then, using it for your own, for how you need.
Mm. Yeah. And are you leading doula trainings this coming year? What is that looking like for you?
Yes, we have one coming up in February on the Big Island of Hawaii. I'll be co-teaching with Jessie Reamer. She's a DONA certified doula trainer, and so she'll be teaching the DONA curriculum, and then I get to add on all the other holistic juicy stuff that's not included in their curriculum. So we'll be like writing birth songs and creating birth art and doing massage and talking about nutrition and even blessing way ritual. So we'll be going deep with that. So it'll be a 5-day training. And if you want to find out more about that, you can go to my website, which is hopemedford.com, or you can go to mothertreebirth.com, which is Jessie's website.
Amazing. Thank you for those resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to hear just a little more about your journey with the drum. Like, was that something that you were drawn to since you were a child, or did it come later?
I was drawn to it since I was a child. But again, I mentioned I grew up in Kentucky, and there were not many hand drums there. It took me, I was taking drum classes I started in like 6th grade, and but it was all in the drum kit, and it was not my passion. And then finally, when I was a teenager, I found an African djembe and fell in love instantly, and got my first djembe within about a year. And then once I got it, I played it every single day for the next 2 years. And honestly, I even like slept with it some nights. I loved it so much. I would take it to the woods and I would play by myself. I didn't have classes. I was just listening to the sounds of nature and playing, and just go to the park. And but I would go every day, and it was just, I don't know where that came from. There was nobody else in my family playing music. But the drum is an amazing tool. Obviously it's either is the oldest or it's the second oldest instrument known to humankind. Every culture has a different type of drum that they've evolved with and used for ritual and ceremony. And this African drum, the djembe, which is the one I picked up from West Africa, it has many, many stories. This one was made by a master drum carver from their community in, I believe it was Ghana. And the drum makers are born into a lineage of being able to make drums. You have to be born into it to make drums at that point in time. That was the way it was passed down by generation by generation. So there's ancient knowledge in the drum that's being made. And they say it's the spirit of the tree combined with the spirit of the skin, the animal that gave it skin. And so now you have two spirits coming together. And then when you hit that drum with your intention, with your hand, then you have three spirits coming together, and it creates this synergy and alchemy. And certainly you can play your own rhythms, and you should, especially as women, because I feel like drumming has been, primarily dominated by men for a while now. And so, co-creating our own rhythms as women, I think, is crucial and important. And then having said that, playing some of these traditional rhythms from different cultures are also an amazing gift, because most, if not all, of these songs that were written and have been passed down for hundreds or thousands of years were created with an intention and played at either certain ceremonies or certain rituals or at certain times that literally have within them a lock, that it's like a mantra that you're unlocking, and the key is that rhythm. And so that energy gets unlocked as you play it. And so it releases this ancestral energy in medicine. And that potency is more rare in modern America, right? So using these ancient tools helps our subconscious remember who we are and where we come from. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of the powerful and really fun things that's been about using these, indigenous drums on a modern stage for me, and mixing that music with modern music and fusion. And, it's pretty exciting and dynamic. The other instrument that I now have been playing for about, I don't know, maybe 14 years is the cajon, which is they come from Cuba and Peru. It's a diaspora instrument, but it originated from actually an African tribe that was taken on to slave ships, and their drums were taken away, and they started playing the boxes on the ships. And when they were brought to Cuba and Peru, they continued to play these boxes, and these boxes evolved into cajons. And cajon is a Spanish word for box. It's a box drum. They're all different shapes and sizes. And in Cuba, they're only played as ceremonial instruments. And in Peru, they became more of a folk instrument and more common. But they've evolved in both places. And my cajon is more of an Afro-Peruvian, and it's a bajo cajon, so it's a larger bass drum. And it's the drum I've played, all the way through the journey, the day I met Nahko, and all the way through the band and on the albums with them. And I love that drum because it's very versatile. The djembe is a powerful, loud drum that was meant to be heard from one village to the next. outdoors in large, spaces in Africa. And the cajon is much more of an indoor drum, and because you're playing on wood with your hands, you're not getting this huge booming sound like a djembe. But you get all this diversity with the tonality, and also you can use your feet to bend the wood and pitch bend and do some really fun dynamic tonality things with that. So those are my two favorite drums. Yeah, I forget where we started with that question.
Yeah. It's so great to hear all of this. When I was in fourth grade, I think I was 10 years old, and we had the choice to choose an instrument to be like in the band, to start learning the band practice. And I chose the drum.
Yeah.
And so, but all they had at that time was like they gave you the sticks and then like a little practice pad to work with the sticks. And I was like, what is this? And I remember our teacher was so horrible. He was really mean and just like so like rigid, of like we were looking at sheet music and like doing with the sticks. And I actually, like, after not very long, I asked my mom if I could quit because it just didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And
that is very similar to what happened to me in sixth grade. Yes, it was very similar. It totally kills the vibe. There is nothing, about playing a plastic pad and going to written music when compared to the oral tradition of more indigenous people's drums. And, you never once pull out a piece of music. It's always an oral tradition. And you actually learn the drum language and you speak it and you sing it before you play it. And it's very interactive and alive. So yeah, it's totally different, but I feel you, girl.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah. And I did, in the last 2 years, I found this all women's drum group in Sebastopol. So I go to that sometimes and definitely started finding my rhythm, and really just, it's amazing once you start finding that beat and that rhythm and just working with it. It's like dancing changes and just a lot opens up in the body, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my other passions is really kind of evolved from my work with midwifery, of just recognizing that most women that are giving birth the way they want are able to use their voice. And you're both vocalizing in labor, right? Sometimes you have to be loud and express yourself and open up because your mouth is connected to your cervix. And when you open your mouth, your baby can come out easier. So literally that opening of the voice in labor, but also speaking up for yourself, telling your care providers what kind of birth you want, even choosing the kind of care providers you want, choosing where you want to give birth, not letting, your family decide for you or tell you where you should birth or how you should birth. These things are critical for when you get into labor process and you recognize how intense the experience is. You need to be exactly where you want to be, right? So you need to be making those choices and speaking up for yourself. So once I learned how important that is to birthing the next generation, my passion became about helping women speak up and speak for themselves and developing their voices, which I feel like the drum is the perfect tool for that, because it can be so loud, right? It doesn't have to be, you can play it softly, but a lot of women aren't used to being heard. So it's really fun for me to gather a group of women around, and being a woman as a teacher, they'll trust me, and gathering a group of drums around and then encouraging them to make noise, first of all. And, depending on who you are, for some women, they'll immediately just hit it and know exactly what to do. But there's plenty of women, especially of older generations, that are very hesitant. So being encouraged through games and practices and exercises to build a relationship with being heard. And then in a drum circle, you have this community experience of listening to each other and making sound together. But then you can certainly take turns and solo, and then you have those moments of, expressing your voice without having to use words. And it becomes the second voice for women that becomes very empowering and unlocking doors. I've used drum circles in this way at a domestic violence shelter for women, also used it quite a bit over a couple of years working with at-risk youth groups for teenagers. And I really love that work as well. The drum is just such a healing tool when it's facilitated well and in a trusting, safe environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a lot of my work too, is just women trusting their voices and speaking up and knowing, like really being in tune with their intuition, and but then using their voice and the sharing their message and speaking up in times when, it might feel scary. Or another thing I wanted to just mention, this past 7 months, I've also been learning the didgeridoo. And
Awesome.
that was something that I never would have expected. It kind of was a roundabout how I got led to it, through wanting to deepen my lung capacity, and also to help with sleeping, because it's shown that like when you have more oxygen in your body and your airway passages are opening up, you can sleep better. And so I was led to that and on this journey. And it's interesting because not very many women are play that instrument. And I think it was probably maybe similar to you being in the professional music scene as a woman drummer. And it's just fun to like, when I tell people now, they're just like, whoa, it's kind of badass.
Yeah, it is. That's great. I remember when we were in Australia, because we toured in Australia 3 times, and the didgeridoo gentleman that I knew there even expressed at one point, like traditionally didgeridoos were for men only. And it's very fascinating. There's also like certain drums like that, like the bata drum, which I love, which is a double-headed drum. They were also only played by the priests, and but the male priests. But there's always then the women that come along and break through that. And it's a powerful thing to do, with respect to those cultures and all of that. But also this is a modern world, and it's time to do those things and to take things into your own hands and do it with the proper intention. And I love the didgeridoo, and circularly breathing to continue that sound is something that I highly respect. Those are great instruments, and they're so fun. And some people can tell entire stories, right? They would talk through the didgeridoo. The different sounds that they make were telling different aspects of their journey through their song. So they would as they're making these tones, there would be a sound that would be like, oh, that's that animal, and oh, that's the sound of like I'm walking over that river. And so they'd be like these journey songs through the didgeridoo with all these subtle sounds and stories. And which the ancient Aboriginal people were such amazing people that journeyed and had next to nothing, but the didgeridoos were one of their tools. And I see them as almost like ancient wizards. Like they're such powerful people that certainly suffered a terrible genocide in Australia, and that's always to be recognized, and honoring them for what they've been through.
Yeah.
But their descendants, their ancestors are amazing, and their Dreamtime spaces and the song lines that they carry across their lands are incredible. I wanted to say something else too when we were talking about empowering women's voices, because this is always, this is why I think, Meredith, you and I have a lot in common, and I look forward to more time chatting with you in the future. This project that I started, once I had my daughter, I couldn't tour full time. So I decided to start this, I don't even want to call it a festival, because that wasn't the original idea. I was coming out with a new CD at the time, a new solo album. And so it was going to be my CD release party. But, my nature is like, well, I don't want it to be just about me. I want to include as many other women as possible, more bands, more dancers. And then it quickly grew into this vision of, okay, let's have a women's festival here on the island, on Big Island. And so we named it Mana Fest. And Mana is the Hawaiian word for spiritual power, energy. And also we liked that it resonated with the word Ma. And that we like to manifest. We like to manifest things, right? So we're always creatresses, and that creative energy is what makes women so powerful. And so so this year, Manifest is going to be January 24th through 26th. This is our 5th annual Manifest. coming up this winter, and everyone is welcome and everyone is invited, and men and women are totally invited and included. We feature female performers and artists and educators, but men are very much involved if they'd like to come. And I'd love to talk about that more, but also I was going to say that the Tuesday after, so the 28th through the 30th of January, I'm going to be facilitating a Raising Our Voices 3-day workshop with several of the well-known performers that are coming out for Manifest. So again, if anyone listening wants to get involved and come out and use their voice, use the drum, get involved, learning more about music as a tool of empowerment, voice as a tool of empowerment, then please join us then. And so that's January 28th through 30th, and that'll be up on my website this week. And it's called Raising Our Voices. So I'm really excited about that. I had that vision last year, and with having a toddler, it seems that things take just one more season to get it going. And now I have some great musicians that are going to be joining me on that. So there'll be 3 other women co-facilitating with me, teaching their pieces to that. Some hip hop and some drumming and some vocalizing, and it'll be really fun and fresh. So that's on the Big Island as well.
Amazing. Yeah. And can you just speak at all to just your connection to the Big Island? I went there my first time in October, and I loved it. And I would love to hear about your connection to that island.
Sure. Yeah. I'm so glad you made it out here, Meredith. Yeah. So my mother has a love for Hawaii. So I had been a few times in my life, the first time as a teenager. But when I started playing with Nahko in around, I guess, 2006 or so, 2007, we started coming out here together, and we would spend the winters out here, and then we would play gigs, and we would gig the whole island. So he had lived here for 2 years before, and so he knew all the different, towns around, and become friends with the folks at all the different venues. So we started playing, and we would just tour the whole island. And so, at one point we were just him and I and Dustin Thomas and Chase Mackay. We were all living together in this little, we call it the Pink House in Hilo. It's in one of our music videos. But that was real. We did live there all together for a little while, and Dustin was opening for us, and Chase, we just met. He's now been, touring as a guitar player. Dustin stepped in a few years later as the bass player. And, but first it was Nahko and I that were doing like a duet tour, and Max Ribner, who is our horn player, who's epic. Max and Nahko had actually met out here before I met them, and when Nahko was writing some of these songs. And, so yeah, it was just a joy to come out here with those guys, and then kind of fall in love with Hawaii again through new eyes and this way of playing music, and through their community of surfers. And I've always been a swimmer, so getting in the water and just bringing this music as it was being, really co-created at that time, the synergy of medicine for the people coming around. So we'd spend a few months here every winter. And as we toured more and more, we would still come here in the winter, and then we'd go from here to maybe Australia or New Zealand or Bali. They're all kind of on a similar Pacifica circuit. And so my relations here grew, and I had been living in Cascadia, which is where I'd met Nahko. But then I had more and more current community here on the island. After about 5 or 6 years of coming here for the winter. And again, because Medicine for the People has gathered such an amazing community of activists and permaculturalists and socially conscious people, and just beautiful, lovely, open hearts. So it was really easy to make and meet such a great community here on this island. People really just came out and were open arms with me. And even the local Hawaiian community, close to where I live now, the old Hawaiian patriarch of the family personally welcomed us, our band, to be here, and it was such an honor. because they loved our music, and they, the Hawaiians are so down with like good music, and had us play at their family venue like a number of times, and they were some of the best shows I've ever played in my life, under the stars by the ocean here. And but so my love for the island grew, and then when I was pregnant, my last show I played on the tour was in Hilo, and so I ended up staying, not even intentionally, but it just opened up for me so quickly here, and a house opened up, and things, the midwife showed up, and it was really calling, and so we stayed. And the power here is so unique. It is the most alive place on the planet, or as alive as any other place that has live volcanoes, right? So the freshest land on the planet, the newest beach on the planet is right here. And so that edge is this ultimate creative force, right? And so I have some friends that visit, and they're like, that's such an intense energy. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice, for a while, because I'm like, I feel like I'm always in my creative flow. And I think the creative energy in here just resonated, well together with my energy, vice versa. But having said that, it's deeply sacred. There's this, potent spiritual energy and aloha here that's so unique on this land. The Hawaiian culture is having a renaissance comeback with, there's a lot of Hawaiian education happening on this island now that's really healthy and positive and powerful. And, many of us who are not Hawaiian blood are in huge support of the Hawaiian movement here. And probably a lot of people have heard of the Mauna Kea stand that's happening right now up on Mauna Kea, the mountain. There's a cultural threat currently happening up there where scientists want to build a huge telescope and observatory on top of the mountain, but it is next to a sacred heiau on sacred land. And so there's been a huge protest, and protesters living there now for about 3 months straight now, including many, many elders. And they're doing their Hawaiian chants and hula practices there daily, and holding this cultural stand there. So there is a lot of indigenous strength that is revitalizing here. That's important because, it's always important talking about new lands to recognize what the indigenous people have gone through. And so I want to honor them, and also just give thanks for this opportunity to be here on this land, because it is certainly beautiful, and the tropical, rich, lush vegetation is special, and the water and is abundant. And I have a whole background in permaculture gardening, and my environmental sustainability sides of myself and who I've embodied in this lifetime absolutely love being here, because I'm constantly out in my garden. It's part of my daily practice, is working on my land and growing a lot of food, and just taking care of the trees. We call it malama in the aina here. You malama the aina. The aina is the spiritual sacred land here, and to malama is to take care of it. So that potency of malamaing the aina of this place and honoring and respecting it here has been a gift to me and my family.
Thank you for sharing all of that. So
you're welcome.
So much just potent energy that island carries. So
and so having said that, it's a really special backdrop to our festival, Manifest, which I would love to just say a little bit more about, because it's really exciting and it's coming up soon. It's at the end of January. And kind of like what you're doing, Meredith, by spotlighting women and giving them the opportunity to speak. This festival is based on that concept. And what we notice, what we see, is when women are put in the spotlight, they rise. Women know how to rise, and we're ready for that, even when we don't think we are. When someone else believes in us, then suddenly we believe in ourselves in this much deeper, stronger way. And that's that's what Manifest is for, is to create a stage where more women can be seen and heard. Because my experience of playing hundreds of stages with Nahko and Medicine for the People and festivals is that most of these festivals are representing primarily men. And like if you look at a lineup of most festivals, the average festival will feature at least 80% male voices. And so Manifest is really special and unique. And at first it feels subtle, the power that you see when you just start hearing women's voices everywhere. But we've now grown our board. We have 7 sisters, we say, that put on Manifest, and we work together as a small board of directors. And then we have a large volunteer staff that's co-ed. And then we usually have about 25 bands, which I'm almost finished booking right now. We have almost the full lineup on our website, which is manifestival.org. So we have almost our full musical lineup. We have some dance performers, and also there are over 25 workshops. We're really heavy on the education. We have a red tent for all kinds of more women's specific honoring mysteries workshops. We have a purple tent, which is our gender fluid, gender neutral, and masculine space where men can teach. And then we have 3 other workshop spaces, and so they're all going throughout the festival. Anything from beekeeping to making your own herbal plant medicine, to yoga, to hula and Hawaiian cultural arts. It's a wide variety of really beautiful, potent workshops. And some of the musicians coming out this year, we have Shyla Ray from the West Coast. We have Ascension Alchemy, which is an island-based fusion project that's amazing. We have DJ Leapin Ligris coming out. She's an amazing DJ because we have the full ecstatic dance wooden dance floor. Of course, I'll be playing as well this year. We have Lily Fangs, who's hip hop from the islands and known nationally. Amber Lily, who's been on the rise in the last few years with Tubby Love, and Amber features her own solo music, and she's amazing. Adine, Kahele, a whole incredible lineup. So check that out. And it's really 3 days full of just, we call it honoring the divine feminine. We're holding the sacred space, but it's playful, it's fun, it's clean, it's family friendly. We have a marketplace. There's a pool constantly going with the pool party with female DJs at the pool. We have 2 stages running most of the time. And it's at this beautiful tropical permaculture style retreat center, Kalani Retreat Center, which is absolutely gorgeous near the ocean. So it's super affordable. It's less expensive than you'd ever guess because we try to make it very community friendly. And the Big Island, our island, is the most affordable of all of the islands out here. So we do have a lot more kind of farming and community-oriented events here. And Manifest has been well-received and well-loved. And there's a whole keiki zone for the kids where they do activities. And there's a hot tub and open and free for all. So it just keeps growing every year. And I welcome each and every one of you to come out and join us for that. And if anyone has cut that last thing. I was going to say, if anyone wants to teach a workshop, but by the time you air this, we'll have already decided. So never mind on that one.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds amazing. We'll include the links in the show notes.
Okay, thanks.
It has been an honor just to get to know you better and to hear everything you're up to in the world. Any last closing words before I say a short prayer to end this call?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you. And I feel like these times have been challenging times, for most of us planetarily, globally, certainly in the United States. And right now we're all holding on. We're just, many days it's about trying to stay strong and trust that that stability is coming, because these are shaky times. And within that place, forgiving and softening, finding that stillness and finding those pieces and those rituals for yourself that you can do each day. And as a woman, again, I feel like our greatest strength is returning to our creativity. And when we are creative, then we connect to source. And that is a direct link to the divine. And whatever path of creativity that's easiest for you, if it's cooking, if it's artwork, if it's music, if it's gardening, or if it's creating a whole beautiful event, whatever it is, just keep returning to that creative energy. And the small, simple ways are just as potent as the big ones. And that, that creativity is what will keep us in our joy and our happiness, and will bring us again, to our next moment. So that's my last thought is, if you'd like to get involved in any of these projects I'm doing, again, it's hopemedford.com. And I'm always coming up with new projects and inviting people to get involved. And I'm teaching online as well as in person. But for yourself and in your daily experience, just please stay creative and stay in that feminine spirit. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Hope. Just bringing it all into our heart, honoring just all the gifts that we have to share in this life, and tuning into that creative life force energy. May we each be guided to give back in the ways that our hearts are calling us to, and I trust that our voices and our gifts are needed at this time. So namaste.
Thank you. Namaste, Meredith.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.